Welcome back, Stillmaniacs. Today we are poking around in Stillmania once again. But before we start, be sure to like, share and subscribe so you don't miss an update. Nigel Stillman's superb Bretonnian army was a joy to behold whenever it graced the hallowed pages of White Dwarf. In this edition, we are developing the paint scheme to include heraldry and starting to build lore for the army. Nigel was a stickler for realism, and it really shows. His army was gritty and basic in a medieval kind of way. Colours would be bright but not outlandish. The knights would be boldly block painted with dirty edges. Squires and men-at-arms would be dirty and pallid according to their obvious status in the force, whilst characters would glisten in the daylight sun, draped in all manner of gold and silver. Something of note would be his use of name tags for the characters, printed in regal Gothic style writing. This will be familiar to many of you who use 3D printed resin nameplates on your 30k and 40k miniatures. Nigel was thus somewhat of a trendsetter, even back in the 90s, it seems. Of course, we are here to listen to some Stillmania, so let's get down to it, baby. The Chanson de Valour. My Bretonnian army is meant to represent a real Bretonnian retinue, and so I have been thinking about a background story for the force. Just as the Bretonnian kingdom in the Warhammer world has a background, described in the army's book, so too does my own army. All that is necessary is a paragraph or two describing how the army came about, where in Bretonnia it comes from, and the names and feats of arms of the various characters. This gives the army an identity, and such things are pleasing to me. It's another way I can indulge my imagination and delve into the lore of Bretonnia. When I have a good idea and names for my characters, I shall write these down on a scroll, which will be a prologue to the army roster. Battle honours can be added to this document in due course. I have an idea to present the story of the army as something from a Bretonnian Chanson de Valour, recording the exploits of a famous retinue. My army will represent the retinue and, no doubt, should include a model of the troubadour who sings the battle ballad. Enchanted Retinue. I have a vague idea for the background to my army. What I want is to represent the retinue of a Bretonnian enchantress. She will be represented by a high-level wizard. Of course, she will not be the general. She is in fact a renowned Grail damsel, who is the lady of the Grail chapel, located perhaps on an island in the middle of a sacred lake shrouded in mists, or by the sea on a rocky coast of Bretonnia. As you may have guessed, I am inspired by tales of Arthur's Avalon. The Grail chapel is guarded by a castle in which reside a retinue of knights and men-at-arms who serve the lady. Most of these will be questing knights, led there by visions, and knights errant sent there to win their spurs in her service. The general is, of course, the only Grail knight in the retinue. He is the resident Grail knight of the chapel, who has renounced the world to serve and guard the holy shrine. The lady has several younger novice Grail damsels in her retinue, and these will be represented by low-level wizards. The chapel and its castle are part of a small domain, with its own peasants to tend the vines and bring in provisions to the castle. Some of these serve as men-at-arms, bowmen or squires. The retinue is therefore not an ordinary feudal retinue of a duke or baron, but a religious foundation. Perhaps there is more than a hint of sorcery, and the lady has actually cast a spell of enchantment over the knights who serve her. If I opt for this story, then I ought to build a Grail chapel and castle as part of the project. There is even a place for the Green Knight himself in this story. Errantry War. Alternatively, the army could represent a retinue setting out on an errantry war. This is a sort of mixture between a pilgrimage and a campaign. The objective is perhaps a lost Grail chapel, and all the retinue are united in the enterprise by having all experience visions of the Lady of the Lake, leading them ever onwards. The Grail damsels are, again, represented by wizards, and they ride in wagons. Their escort is provided by knights who have forsaken their domains to follow the errantry banner. Now, of course, there are large contingents of questing knights and knights errant, but also knights of the realm. Once again, the general is the only Grail knight present. The knights have brought with them their retinues of men-at-arms, bowmen and squires. If I opt for this story, then I can do without the chapel and castle, but I need a baggage train and tented encampment. I am tending in favour of this story, since it explains how the army could turn up anywhere and fight anyone, and also it allows for a contingent of Knights of the Realm, whereas the Enchanted Retinue doesn't really have a place for them. When it comes to painting the army, the story explains why the retinue includes diverse coats of arms, which perhaps is a consistent motif adopted by the knights as a kind of pilgrimage badge, maybe a gold fleur-de-lis. Also, I can model a rather battle-weary and muddy effect on the knights to show that they have been on the pilgrimage for a long time and have overcome many foes and perils, a force to be reckoned with. Such a pilgrimage would definitely include a troubadour to compose a chanson about the enterprise, perhaps Tristan himself. It might also attract other renowned knights to its banner, allowing me to include special characters. The Order of Battle. The army roster itself will take the form of a scroll made to look like the sort of thing that a Bretonnian herald would compile for the lord commanding the army. At this stage, I must decide exactly what the army composition will be. My decision will, of course, affect the way I paint up the models and how many standard bearers, musicians, and characters I will need to lead units. The main consideration, however, is tactics on the battlefield. I must decide on an army composition that suits the kind of tactics I favour. I decide on the following order of battle. Grail Knight General, Army Standard Bearer with Magic Banner, 1 regiment of questing knights with Magic Banner, 1 regiment of Knights Errant with Errantry Banner, 1 regiment of Knights of the Realm, 3 heroes with knightly virtues leading the knights, 1 regiment of mounted squires, 1 regiment of foot squires to act as skirmishers, 1 big regiment of men-at-arms armed with spears, 1 regiment of bowmen, 1 master wizard, and 2 wizards. Reserve units include another regiment of bowmen, more knightly heroes to strengthen the knightly units, spare standard bearers to split the mounted squires, men-at-arms, knights of the realm, and bowmen into smaller units if required, spare models to increase the size of any units as required. In this way, I can field 2,000 or 3,000 points, conform to tournament rules as required, and use the army in campaigns where varied troop types and recruitment are required. The muster rolls. All the knightly characters must have a suitably noble Bretonnian name and heraldry. This needs to be recorded on the Herald's muster roll, or, in other words, on my roster scroll. Also, all the other characters and regiments need names. My background reading on Arthurian legends and medieval France will help me come up with some suitably inspiring names. I shall also look at some books on heraldry to find striking heraldic designs. When I paint my knights, I'll use real heraldic motifs, but in different colours. Some emblems will, of course, be suggested by the crests sculpted on the models. I also need to devise suitably splendid designs for the banners, especially for magical banners. The army file cards will be excellent for recording details of my characters. You simply write the character's name where it says unit. So I shall be noting down my characters on these cards and probably adding their coat of arms to provide me with a quick reference. This will help me recognise them in battle, remember which ones have got which virtues, assign them to units, and remember where they are in the confusion of dice rolling. On the reverse, I shall note their feats of arms and perhaps also include any jousting information I might need for using the same characters in a tourney game, like that described in the Perilous Quest campaign pack. Bretonnian Heraldry. The prospect of painting heraldry is a daunting one. I want my knights to look striking and warlike, and I'm hoping that simple heraldic schemes with bold colours will do the trick. It is very difficult to paint intricate designs over the folds of the horse cloth, so I want to avoid doing this. Complicated designs are great if you can carry them off, but it takes practice. I will leave my best characters to last, to build up my experience on the others first. After tackling a few Knights of the Realm, I began to learn a few things. Firstly, I settled for mainly dark horses, black or brown. Most of the knight's horse is covered with barding, so there is no need for striking colours on the coat. It is better for them not to clash with the heraldry. Maybe I'll paint 1 or 2 white or grey horses for the odd knight or character. Horses are easily painted brown with a shading of brown ink and a dry brush. Secondly, the lining of the barding is visible and had to be painted another receding colour. Black or dark red seems to work best. When this was done, I painted the barding in a solid colour. Some I decided to quarter or paint a different colour on each side. I decided to leave emblems for the shields, and so the barding is fairly basic except for a few knights. I used transfers for some of the shields. I decided to put transfers on one knight's barding and to get the emblems to fit on over the folds of cloth. I trimmed the transfers before soaking them so that the part of the emblem obscured by the fold was cut off the transfer. When transfers are dry, it is a good idea to overpaint the shiny clear film and the emblem a bit to blend it into the colour scheme. This also helps to give the impression that the emblem is applied cloth or embroidery. It takes a lot of thought to come up with a good heraldic colour scheme for a knight and get all the elements of it, whether stripes, chevrons, quarters or whatever, arranged symmetrically. It is worth looking at books on heraldry to get ideas. Thirdly, if the horse barding is painted in bold, plain colours, it helps to paint a border around the edge and around the muzzle of the horse and the eye holes. This quickly transforms a fairly boring colour scheme into a believable, neat and striking one. Neatness in painting is one of the best skills you can have for painting Knights' Heraldry. Of course, I'm not a very neat painter, so why, oh why, did I pick a Bretonnian army? Questing Knight Heraldry. Many questing knights replace their old heraldry with entirely new designs, showing only the Lady of the Lake's special device, the blazon of the Fleur-de-Lys. This is a magical lily that grows only in places where the Lady of the Lake appears. Knight of the Realm Heraldry. When a knight-errant achieves his errand of knighthood, he is allowed to adopt a blazon, or emblem appropriate to the task he accomplished. So, if the knight slew a dragon, he may display the image of a dragon as his blazon. Bretonnian Standard Bearers. For the standards, I wanted to give the impression of a rather heavy cloth banner, rather like a tapestry. To get this effect, I took a piece of cotton cloth and painted it with white paint on one side only. The paint soaked through the cloth and stiffened it. Then I cut out the shape of the banner, with tabs for attaching it to the banner pole. The resulting banner has a cloth texture to it and can be creased slightly to give the impression of folds. It looks thicker and heavier than a paper or tin foil banner. I left the banner plain white, ready to paint on the colours or emblems appropriate to the regiment at a later stage. These will be painted on thickly to resemble a heavily embroidered tapestry banner. Battered Shields. Real shields were made of wood covered with leather or canvas on which the heraldry was painted. In battle, these took a lot of damage and had to be repaired from time to time. I expect that each knight had several shields in his baggage. I want some of my knights and men-at-arms to be carrying battered shields, so that they look like they have been in a fight. Plastic shields are ideal for modelling battle damage. The easiest way is to nick the edges of the shield with a modelling knife, clippers or file. This represents the effect of sword cuts caught on the edge of the shield. The front of the shield can be scored with the modelling knife to look like it has parried a few sword slashes. Small holes can be drilled into the shield and short lengths of plastic rod or wire inserted to look like arrows sticking out of the shield. Models bearing such battered shields, suitably painted up to look battle-worn, can be mixed into a regiment to give the whole unit a realistic look. Pennants. It is my intention to give every knight a lance pennant. This looks good when the knights are massed into units and gives the impression of movement, with pennants fluttering as the knights canter and gallop. The pennants are also for recognition on the battlefield, and so will have the heraldic colours of the knights. I shall use the same cloth method to make these as for the big banners, using offcuts from the bigger standards for the pennants. I shall opt for small pennants rather than long tapering ones, which I think are too flamboyant for battle, and make the knights look too fancy. My Bretonnians are hard fighting campaigners. Maybe for tournaments they would use tapering pennants, but not on the battlefield. Baggage and carriage. An army is not really complete without its baggage train. For a small army representing a retinue of a single baron, perhaps setting out on a pilgrimage, the baggage train need not be more than 1 or 2 wagons or carts. These can carry important supplies, such as casks of wine and a spit roasting kit for when the baron does some hunting along the way. The rest of the army's supplies can be carried by the commoners and squires. The Baron's lady, or perhaps the Grail damsels, might like to ride in the wagon, or it could carry holy relics. The baggage comes into play in scenarios such as an ambush, in which case the wagon must be escorted and protected from being looted. A baggage wagon poses an interesting chance to do some scratch building and conversion. Plastic wheels, horse and matchsticks are useful. I plan the wagon to have a cloth canopy, highly arched in the Gothic style and decorated with gold fleur-de-lis. A squire will serve as the driver. The Reliquary. When the army is finished, I want to make a box to carry it in, which will also be a way of displaying the army. I think an army on which you have lavished care and attention needs a decent box to live in and deserves to be displayed well. Obviously, I'm going to give the box a proper Bretonnian theme. What better than a reliquary decorated with fleur-de-lis? The box will be made from scratch using MDF board and will have a hinged side, gabled roof and shelves inside, all designed for the models to fit into. The box will be covered in red or blue velvet cloth, and I shall use brass hinges and corner bits on top. Then I shall get some of those gaudy gold fleur-de-lis Christmas decorations and stick them onto it. The box must have a slot in it for the rulebook and army book, and a very strong handle. That just about wraps up the 5th of the Stillmania articles, and the 3rd in the mini-series of Questing for the Grail. With it in mind, I encourage you to take some of this valuable information into your own wargaming. Join me next time for some more wargaming content. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.